and welcome back to another episode of She is a Testimony. Today, my guest is the lovely, the gracious, the beautiful Lady Kadian Wedderburn. Lady Wedderburn, please say hello.
Hello, everyone. Just want to say a pleasant good night, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for having me, Sam.
Awesome. And thank you for saying yes to the invitation, being a part of this vision. So just to give a background to the audience, she is the wife of my big brother in ministry, Bishop O'mar Wedderburn. Lady Wedderburn, to get started, I do want to ask you to think about a word or a phrase that you can use to describe yourself or your life. What would it be?
I'm ambitious, I'd say. One of the key words that a lot of people would associate with me would be, Kadian, you're just a go-getter. You just go and get it. So yeah, definitely. I am ambitious for the things of God, and of course, my personal achievements. Yes. So yeah, I think that's one.
Ambitious. I love that. I note here that you have over 12 years of experience as a lecturer of English language and English literature. Is that something that you love? If yes, how did you get started? And how do you find that job?
Oh, definitely yes to your first question. It's something that I love, something I enjoy doing. I've always wanted to become a teacher from the age of 9, I can remember. And one of my reasons for that was because there's about 4 or 5 of my aunts who were teachers. One of them specifically, I literally, I aspired to be like her. And so definitely I knew I wanted to teach, wasn't sure what subject I wanted to teach or what age group I wanted to teach. But after much trial and error, teaching children just wasn't for me. Toddlers or primary school age, that wasn't something I enjoyed doing. I found it quite pretentious doing it. And so when I actually volunteered to work in a more secondary school, working with like adolescents, teenagers, adolescents, adults, that's my forte. I like working with that sort of age group. So yes, that's what I've been doing.
So you've always known what you wanted to do and you've always just walked accordingly.
No, not at all. Not at all. So if I was to just take you back a little bit, I left high school in Jamaica with no subject whatsoever. So I chose not to. Can you believe that?
Wow.
I chose not to, and it was what I say, it was just one of a very gullible, I'd say, decision I make. And I was given an ultimatum, and it was either I'd get married or do my CXCs, and it was I'm going to get married. So I had my priorities in the wrong place. So got saved at the age of 14, started in ministry, very active, sung in the choir, praise team leader, choir director. We did praise dance. I was the praise dance leader. I was the youth secretary. I was doing a whole lot of things. I was very active in the ministry. And when I was approached by a young man who said, "Oh, Kadian, I'm in love with you," I think the whole concept of someone loving me clouded my vision, clouded my mind. And so I was like, okay, all right, let's talk. And so we started to talk, and of course within the church we had to go and explain to our pastor that we liked each other and so on. And so he was like, okay, if you like each other, then you need to get engaged. And he was quite excited, and myself, I was quite excited. I mean, I was insecure never thought that anyone would love me, or, you know, never thought that I was beautiful enough for anyone to love. So when he actually, you know, expressed his feelings, I, you know, literally went, bought a ring and proposed. And shortly after the proposal, we were called into a meeting, oh, you need to get married within 6 months. So that's how I ended up actually getting married the month when I should be doing my exams.
So
In
how
fact,
old were you, around 16, 17?
17 years old.
At 16, 17 years old, were you prepared?
No, I was not prepared, meaning, okay, so we liked each other, and I thought in my head, okay, we're going to get to know each other. I've never had a relationship before, so I you know, I was quite new to it. But I took what my pastor said as gospel, you know, you had to get married within 6 months, and therefore I just adhered to that rule. I remember we had counseling. So I got married at 104 Walton Park Road, Bishop Arabler. I remember we had about, I think about 4 or 5 counseling session, premarital counseling session beforehand. But I remember Pastor Blair actually saying, Kadian, because he knows me personally, he's like, so Kadian, why are you getting married? And I was like, because my pastor said I need to get married in 6 months. And right there and then he sat and he was, you know, you don't have to do this though. In fact, if you were in my church, I'd give you 2 years. He said, and he picked up on himself and he goes, actually, I'd give you 3 years, and I guarantee you'd come back and say to me, you don't want to do it. But for me, I heard what he was saying, but I wasn't listening, if you see where I'm coming from. Because if I was really listening and really understanding what he was saying, then I would have reconsidered, you know. But I just went ahead with it, you know, even when everything was like going wrong. The dress I wanted, I didn't get. The venue I wanted, nothing was going right. And even then it was, no, I'm going to do it because I don't want, you know, this person to say something or that person. So I was more thinking about pleasing people rather than pleasing God, and ultimately pleasing myself and ultimately pleasing God, you know. So I went ahead, got married. My dad wasn't in agreement with it. And so he didn't turn up at my wedding. None of my family members turned up on my wedding apart from my mother, my sister, and uncle. Yeah. Okay. That was it. They weren't in agreement with it at all. Did not support it.
What was at the root of your insecurity though? Have you identified it?
That was a good question, because that was identified, I'd say probably about 6 years ago.
Oh.
So the root of my insecurities and low self-confidence and self-belief is, I think it's rooted in my internalized colorism.
Oh.
And one of the reasons for that is because I grew up, I've got 5 sisters, and all of my sisters, they are clearer in complexion than I am. And therefore I saw myself as the ugly duckling or the black sheep of the family. And I think what further enhanced that feeling was when I going out with my sister, she was about a year younger than I am. And when we went out, it was people's reaction to her. Oh my God, what a girl, so pretty. Oh my God, she's so beautiful. And so my sister will come back with hundreds of dollars, like just Jamaican dollars. But yeah, back then, over 30 years, 35 years ago, that was a lot of money. And she would come back with lots of money. And I never got $1. I never got $1. She'd get $50, $100. She'd get lots of money coming back.
Was light-skinned.
She was light-skinned, browner in complexion, yet clearer in complexion. And so I kind of like associate being beautiful with being brown. And being brown means you get money, you get attention, you get told, I love you, you get told you're beautiful. I never heard that growing up. My parents absolutely loved me. My mom, my dad, he did everything for us. My dad stayed with my mom through thick and thin, and they're still together this day. I know that they love me, gave me everything I ever needed, gave me a roof over my head. My dad worked day and night to support all of his children and his wife. And so I knew that my parents loved me, but they never said it. They never said it outright. They never said, okay, then I love you. And I think I was craving for that attention. I think I was craving to hear, I love you, but I never heard it. And so the first person who said, I love you, I jumped at that opportunity, didn't really find out who he was, you know, what he was like, what's his parent background, you know, and these are things that we don't discuss within the church as it relates to finding the right partner and things like that. So yeah, so there you have it, my low self-esteem, and yeah, everything was just grounded in my internalized concept of what beauty is.
Yes, right. And so Lady Wedderburn, coming from that background and then no CXC subjects, marrying so early, and with all your academic success now, like what really got you back on track where you decided to take the reins of your life and really make something of yourself?
It's never evaded my mind that I was going to pursue what I wanted. I think it was, how was I going to do it? How was I going to have the funds? Because after finishing, leaving high school with no subject, the plan was, okay, I'll get married and then I'll go back to evening classes and I'll get my subject. But that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And so the other way out was, okay, I can get a job as a police officer. And then that would pretty much give me that platform to, you know, get a career and hopefully go back to school. So I initially did the test and everything to become a police officer in Jamaica. And shortly after that, I migrated. So I came to the UK. And once I came here, it was straight into studies. So I literally studied for 10 whole years, 10 years, literally studying here in the UK. I did everything and I started from the bottom. I remember I did like what you'd call foundation maths and English. And I remember my English teacher was like, Kadian, you need to go, you need to do straight, go straight to GCSEs because you're so smart, you're so bright. But because I never taken the exam. I've never taken an exam really. And so I have all these ideas in my head, like you're not good enough, you're not bright enough, you're not smart enough. So when I came here, I literally started from the bottom, ignored what my teachers were saying. Then you're smart, you can just go for it. And I was like, no, I'll start from the bottom. I did literally everything. And I just literally just, you know, studied for the best part of 10 years. Then I went and did my degree in education studies. After that, I did my PGCE, which gave me the qualification to teach. And then I went straight into teaching.
Nice.
It's a lot of hard work and sacrifices. I wouldn't encourage anyone to do it the way I did. The way I did it, because it's a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, and you feel guilty also as a parent, because I was a parent going to university, juggling parenting, juggling a part-time job, full-time parenting, full-time education. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and part of it I feel a little bit guilty because I wasn't spending as much time with my children as well. So yeah, it is hard work. But I will encourage someone out there who, you have made some wrong turns, you have made some negative or bad decisions concerning your life, and it's not too late. I just want to tell someone out there, it's never too late to go back to college, to go back to school, to get your qualification, to get your career going. It's never too late. And I want to encourage you that, you know what, all things are working together for your good. Because even though I made the mistakes I made, the Lord was faithful. When I mean faithful, he was faithful to me. He opened doors for me. And all you need to do is just step out by faith, and he will make a way.
Bless God. Well said. Well said. Is it safe to assume or safe to say that in you stepping out in terms of being ambitious and just going for your goals, going at your dreams, stepping away from a lot of things also included stepping away from the first marriage?
So that first marriage my son came out of that first marriage. So looking back, I would say, do I have any regrets? No. However, I did go through an abusive marriage. I did physical, psychological, emotional, every alley you can think of it. Yeah. And even with that, I stuck it out. I stayed in it simply because I was under the impression concerning the word, if you get married and you get divorced, then, you can't get married again, that sort of thing. And so I kind of stayed in there. A part of me stayed in that marriage as well and didn't say anything. It was because there were so many people that were against me doing it in the first place. Like my dad, it's like I had to prove to my dad, like, this was the right decision. And so I stayed in that marriage, stayed in the hurt, stayed in the pain, stayed in everything, because I was obligated to my my then husband, one. And of course, I was determined to prove to my dad that he was wrong and he should have supported me. Can I just say something to any person who finds themselves in a relationship who you are abused in whatever facet? Can I just say to you that if that man or that woman, I'm not going to leave any gender out, if that man or that woman value you, then they won't put their hands on you. They won't talk down to you if they value you, because you have to remember the commandment that Christ gave to the husband. It says, husband, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave up himself for her. And it's the giving of himself that is important, because if he's then abusing you, obviously he's only thinking about himself, right? He's not thinking about God, and he's not thinking about you. I encourage anyone, if you find yourself in that situation, don't feel obligated. Don't feel obligated because of church, because of doctrines, because of traditions of men. Don't feel obligated to stay because he has been there for whatever the reasons are. Don't feel obligated because he may have supported you in the past. Do not feel obligated at all. If that person is abusive any at all, I pray you garner enough strength to get out. Tell someone about it as well. Because I think the thing I hurt myself the most by keeping it silent. I didn't say anything to anyone.
No one.
No one for years. Not to my mother, not to my father. My mother noticed the very first time there was a scratch on my neck, and asked me if everything's okay. And I literally lied to cover up. But apart from that, I didn't say anything to anyone.
All of those titles that you wore, was that the main factor why you felt you had to hold it all together to maintain that image? Why you felt, okay, I couldn't share this with anyone else?
Yes, it is a key factor. But I think the biggest factor to consider was me. I don't like sharing my inner feelings and my hurt and so on. So I think that has to do a lot with me as well, how I see myself, and of course how people see me,
Right.
as of course the titles, different titles that I hold. We were in a church also with plenty of young people. I think I just didn't want for our marriage to be the first one to break, the first one to end in divorce. I mean, we were taught that, divorce is a no-no. And, in my mind, I was like, I just don't want to be the first one. And I had to live up, like living up to a certain expectation, a certain standard. I actually remember I'm a people pleaser. So I always think about, what is this person going to say? What a church going to say? What are people in the community going to say? So I'm always thinking about what others are going to say and not really about me and how I feel. And so that played a role definitely in my decision to stay silent. So, after I got divorced, I literally walk outside of the will of God, because first and foremost, I blamed God. I was like, God, how could you see this? You are God. You knew what was going to happen. Why did you allow me to venture into this relationship if you knew that this was going to happen? And so for years, I blamed God. I walked out and I was like, I could not understand why. And so I walked out and I was like, I saw myself as a perpetual sinner because I'm divorced. And so I was like, okay, I'm in sin. I'm going to die in sin. So might as well I just continue in sin. And so I literally just walked out and stopped going to church for a little while, because I couldn't understand why a man of God would be, the way he is and continue in the church, and they supported him and everything's fine with him. And I just couldn't see. And so I walked in and I was like, I'm not going to go out with another guy. I'm not going to go out with another Christian guy. These guys are, they're just fake. And so I started blaming God and never really looked at myself, I think it was years after that the Lord reminded me that on the day of my wedding, I literally heard the voice of the Lord said, don't do it. I did not remember that. I remember I was in my room, I was getting ready, and I heard the Lord said, don't do it. And I was like, that's not the voice of the Lord. Why would God tell me on the day of my wedding not to go ahead with this, when of course this guy spent all this money, because it wasn't my parent who took care of the wedding, because they didn't support it. My dad didn't support it. And so I felt obligated to do it anyway, if you see where I'm coming from, because I was like, he spent all his money and then I'm just going to say, no. And what is the church going to say? How are people going to see me? Again, looking at people's opinion of me. So I took a step back and sort of reasoned. I was like, God, the next time I am going to get married, if I ever am going to get married, I said, God, I ain't doing it unless you speak to me. I'm like literally like, God, and that would be my prayer whenever I'm praying. I'm like, God, if I'm to get married again, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to speak to me. And I mean, it has to be clear. You're going to have to speak to me if I'm not going to do it. And I also said, if my dad doesn't agree with it, I wouldn't go ahead and do it.
Wow.
Because the Bible talks about honoring your mother and your father, right? And the first thing I did was I dishonored my father by not, by getting married without his consent. And so I said, I don't want to be in either of those positions again. So yeah, so definitely I did love again. Yeah.
One of the things with experience, it teaches us wisdom. And just from listening to you, I can tell that you took the time needed to work on yourself, to forgive yourself, one, and two, just to let go of the guilt or the shame that came with being a divorced Christian. And I'm so happy that you have come to that place where you said, okay, God, I know what I did initially wasn't what you sanctioned. I now know that I'm going to be listening for your clear, audible approval before I ever say yes again. And thanks be to God. God would have allowed it, that he would have sanctioned your marriage to my dear friend, Bishop Wedderburn. So I hope Bishop don't mind, but I'm going to get in out of business a little bit. The first thing I want to ask you, did you know from the get-go that, okay, yes, this is someone that I'm attracted to, I'm going to pursue it? Or did God have to speak to you? Like, what was that process of just, saying yes to a relationship like?
Oh God. My initial prayer, but I think for me, I was like, I'm over and I'm done with men. I think that's it. I'm just gonna do God and do my children and just get on with my life. That's what I thought. But the Lord would have it that I had an encounter first and foremost with the Lord. It was on my 40th birthday. I remember driving, and while I was in the fast lane, hitting 70 miles an hour, I heard a big loud pop. And I was shocked. I was looking behind, wondering, what was that noise? And, I just heard the Holy Spirit said, pull over. And I pulled over. I was on my rim. And so I put the indicator and pulled right over on the hard shoulder. And when I got out, there was a big rip in my front tire. The driver front tire blew out on the motorway. And I had an encounter with God. And it was so surreal. And it was only like 2 weeks after that, I heard the Lord literally audibly said, O'mar is going to call, be open, be honest. I was like, yeah, O'mar always call. That's what I heard the Holy Spirit said. And I was like, okay. And I totally and completely forgot about it. I just got on with my life, doing
because
me.
You normally talked, right? He was your friend.
He was my friend, always been my friend. We both gave our life to God roughly about January of 1993. And we both got baptized on the 6th of June that very year. And we've been friends forever. Of course, I was here in the UK. He was in Jamaica, but we'll still talk to each other.
We just as a friend.
Pardon? Just as friend. Just as friend. I mean, he knew my ex-husband. He scouted anyone I've spoken to.
Really?
Uh-huh. I had two male best friends, and they scouted everyone I've ever spoken to. So, if I've met someone, I was like, oh, I met someone, and then they'll give them the whole don't play with my sister sort of thing, she's like this and she's like that, but she's the best thing ever, whatever. So I don't know, whatever little man talk, I don't know. But yeah, we're always friends. Any major decisions that I'm making in my life, I'll call him. He'll pray about it. He's like, go ahead, do it. And he'll advise me, or don't do it. There are lots of advice that you're giving me, don't do it. No, this isn't the right person. Kay didn't know. But but I still, ended up not yielding, I would say, to a lot of his advice as a friend. And so we'll talk very often. So when, randomly the Holy Spirit says, oh, Omar's going to call, be open and be honest, I just like, oh, Omar was called anyway. But when he actually rang me shortly after that, which is about 2-3 weeks after that, when he rang, And he said, oh, I've got to put some questions to ask you. And I said, by the way, all up. So the Holy Spirit says you're going to bring, and I need to be open and I need to be honest. And so once he's finished that conversation, yeah, I really needed to be open and be honest. So yeah, I was open for love again. But was I scared?
Oh.
Yes. Did I want to run away? Yes. That's my best friend. Everybody knew us as best friend. We were that close. And so I wanted to like run as far as the east is from the west. I wanted to like, no, no, this isn't going to work. What is everybody going to say? What is our parents going to say? I mean, I was worried, what is my dad going to say? Oh my God. My mom was a missionary at the church. She knows everyone. I was like, oh my God, how is this going to go down? Yeah, it was quite a bizarre one, to the point where even after he's expressed his feeling and everything, and he came off the phone, he was like, love you. And I was like, who's this guy talking to? So, love you, like love. I'm like, there's such word as, and he would say things like, oh, you're beautiful. And I was like, beautiful, me? That word does not exist in my repertoire. So, it was very difficult. But I prayed. I remember praying, and I was like, God, you're going to have to speak to my dad about this one, because I don't think he's going to be in agreement with this one.
Right? You said, Lord, I want you to speak to me. I want to hear your yes. And secondly, I must have my dad's approval.
I was really, really concerned about my dad and whether or not he would agree. And so I remember calling my sister, and I told my sister, and my sister was like, oh my God, that's so good. They're like so excited. And told my sister she was fine, told my mom. And when I tell my mom, my mom always say something to my dad, and she was so scared. She was like, you're gonna have to tell him, but you're gonna have to tell him yourself. And I'm like, okay. And my sister was like, why are you so scared to tell him, Kadian? You're a big woman, you're an adult. You don't tell daddy anything. Why do you feel the need you have to tell him? I was like, I have to, because I promised the Lord, I said, I have to tell him, I made the mistake once, I'm not going to do it again twice. And so yeah. And so I prayed, and I was like, God, you're going to have to do this. And I don't know how this is going to happen, because if my dad say no, I'm not doing it. And I remember calling my dad, and I told him, and yeah, you ask the normal questions. So where is so-and-so, and when did this happen? And, did the little quizzing and thing like that. And I remember he said, so when are you planning to do whatever? And I was like, oh, we're planning it to do this at such time. And he's like, why so quick? And I remember getting off the phone, I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. So I rang O'mar, and I said, O'mar, you're going to have to speak to my dad, because this is not going to go down. I want it. And if he says no, I'm not going to do it.
Doing it, right.
And before I finished speaking to O'mar, while speaking to him, my dad literally called me back and go, you know what? Do what you want to do. Oh. You're a big woman. Make whatever decision you want, and I trust your decisions. And I was like, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I was like, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
And and then of course O'mar rang him, and they had a big lengthy conversation, and yeah, he was fine. So
one thing I can say about Bishop Wedderburn is that he knows God, and if God directs him towards something, best believe he's going to pursue it. And so never for a second I doubted that he said, okay, I have found my wife.
Wow. Yeah. You see, you along with everyone else, had no doubts. I think for me, I had plenty of question marks. And the question mark wasn't him. I knew that God has chosen well, because it's not my choice, that God has chosen well for me. He knows, the hell that I've been through. And so he chose well for me. But I think one of the biggest factors was I have an adult son and a teenage daughter. And so for me, I did not want to get into any sort of relationship with a young teenage girl, with someone who I don't know or who I don't trust.
Right.
And so God was intentional in allowing us to be together, because I would probably die an old, sad woman. Because I really promised myself I would not be, because there's so many different things that are happening in our society today. People are deceptive.
Right.
You can be married and be dating people for a very long time, and they can pretend for a very long time as well. And so because of that, I didn't want to get into any sort of relationship or get married anytime soon to any stranger or a strange person. And so when the Lord brought O'mar into my life, I'm like, this is a guy that I can trust, because this was my friend. This was my friend from 14 years old. I was 14, he was 16. We've been friends, and he's never, ever, said anything to me indecent, ever touched me in any way indecent. He's such a sweetheart. He'd walk everyone home. He's always super protective of, the females in our church. That's just who he is. And I'm like, God could have never brought anyone else into my life except for a man of his caliber.
Bless you. Do you believe that everything that you went through prepared you to be his wife, prepared you to be a first lady? Because that's a heavy title that you wear. Do you think that you were processed for this, or is it something that you've had to grow into?
I believe that I was in preparation for this before I even knew. I could not have guessed that I would have held this title. Let's define first lady. So this is just merely a title that I've acquired. It hasn't been accredited to me. It's just a title that I've been acquired and it's a very unorthodox sort of situation as well, because I married a bishop. So it wasn't like, oh, he's been a bishop for many years, we've been married, and then he was ordained. It was
right.
He was a bishop, and I got married to him, and therefore, this esteemed title falls upon me. But that's all it is, a title. I'm first and foremost his wife, and a mother to my children, a teacher to those who I teach, a mentor, and a counselor to those who I encourage and support. And so the title in itself, all the things that I was doing leading up to holding this title being bestowed upon me, had prepared me for stepping into this role, ultimately to support him in his ministry.
Yes.
To support him in prayer, to support him in fasting, to support him as my husband, to be strong for him, when he needs it, to put my needs aside and to really support him. So yes, I would say that I was prepared for it. I remember actually turning up to my current job, and I remember the Lord saying to me, this is it. I wasn't sure what this was. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to get a job, because this was the day of the interview. And I was like, okay. But I remember whilst working, I remember the Lord saying, this is training ground.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
And I'm like, training ground for what? And I couldn't understand it, but now I know what he meant. It was training ground for where the Lord was about to take me, because even coming into his life, it was just booking after booking after booking after booking. So, and he had a PA at the time. So when I stepped into ministry, his PA was there. She was always there supporting him. But now that I'm in there, she's like, oh, First Lady, what do I do? First Lady, what do you want me to do? Or First Lady, do you have any suggestion for this? And so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, let's do it this way. Let's do that. Let's do that. It's very different and you'd have to speak to others, for wives and apostles of others, bishops and so on. It would be very different for them, because it would be, they're married, he's a pastor first and foremost, or an evangelist, and then they're ordained, and then they kind of grow together. You see where I'm coming from. But this was very, very different. But I believe that the Lord was preparing me and had prepared me for this.
Yes.
In advance.
Definitely. I agree wholeheartedly. I agree. You are such a beautiful complement to his life and to his ministry. So certainly, yes. What I would like to ask you though, were you readily accepted by his congregation or the people in his life? Did persons think that you were worthy, put it that way, of being his wife? What was that perception like, and how did you both manage that?
Wow. At the time, he was an interim pastor, I think in New Jersey. And the congregants there, they embraced me. There were a few female that were interested in him, per se. There were a few suitors, but apart from that, I did have some skepticism from people who we considered to be friends. They were a little bit skeptic about us, about him, about us getting together. People have their own ideas. We've lost some close friends. People who we considered to be friends, who we thought were friends. So we did lose a few friends along the way. But for the most part of it, I think that, yeah, I was accepted. I think if we flip that question, it's that, did I accept myself? Did I feel as though I was worthy of that title or that role? No, I didn't feel I was worthy. I didn't feel I was valuable. I remember my PA kept saying, First Lady, and this kept ringing in my head, First Lady, First Lady, First Lady. And I'm like, who died and made me First Lady? That was the question I was asking myself, like, how did this happen? Because I didn't see myself as worthy, but first and foremost, I'm a divorcee. I've had a child out of wedlock, and all of these things I was just looking at. I was like, I'm not worthy. And I said to him, I'm not worthy of this title.